This the CEO must know but probably doesn't, and it is hurting the company. Hello and welcome to the CEO Show. This is your host Nick Vaidya with guest Christine Woolsey. She's going to share her expertise on a topic of great importance to the productivity of an organization, its innovation, and its culture. The funny thing is that every CEO has to deal with it, but only some choose to engage because they mostly are not cognizant of its importance. I'm talking about your office layout and design. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Christine to the show and find out what cutting-edge research are Google and other similar organizations paying so much attention to in the last few years, and you should too. Christine, welcome to the show. Christine, first of all, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking out the time.
No problem. It's lovely to be here.
So, Christine, I understand that you are an architect. You teach at ASU, Arizona State University, and you are also a specialist in design and layout and how people work together.
Yeah, I actually started my career as a professor in the College of Architecture, and my research area was the impact of physical space on human behavior. And so at the time, this was 25 years ago, what I was looking at was specifically retail environments and how I could get you to stay longer and buy more simply by the width of the corridor in the shopping mall. Then I left the university, ran my own business, landed through various things in business consulting, and now I'm actually back at the university part-time, working in the College of Business, helping business leaders understand how to use those same ideas of the ways that you can manipulate the physical environment to drive behavior.
And that's immensely powerful. There seems to be a penchant in the collective to find simplified black and white one-size-fit-all solutions because they're very attractive in their definition. And so we like to believe, hey, open environments, and nobody questions it anymore. Open environment is the dogma, the theory of the day, so to speak, and we have all given into it. But that's not quite right.
Well, the issue is that the physical environment drives behavior. And the question is, what kind of behavior does your business need? And if your business is filled with, researchers who are creating patentable ideas, they're doing a lot of learning. Learning happens best in a single person environment. Performance happens best in a group environment. And so depending on what your business is, you're going to want to choose the kind of environment that's really going to support the productivity for your people. Now, a lot of people are running to open office for a couple of reasons. One is that they see it in a magazine and it looks cool and it's the next wave and we want a cool looking space too. Look, we're hip, we're great. But the other reason people are running to it is simply facilities cost. So in 1987, the average square footage per person in an office was 220 square feet. And this comes from the Cornet Global Workplace Survey. Today, that average in the United States is 170 square feet. And with an open office, you can theoretically achieve down to 100 square feet. So less than half of the real estate. So your facilities costs are cut in half. And so some people are running because it's cool. Some people are running because it looks financially good. But the issue is if it doesn't support your business strategy and it doesn't make you more productive, then don't do it.
No, absolutely. I understand. In fact, people like to believe certain things because they want to. I mean, the idea of reduced cost is very attractive. You don't have to think any more beyond that because, hey, open space sounds like a great idea. I'll buy into whatever else you're saying simply because I can reduce my cost by 50% or 30%. That is an attractive proposition. Now, more importantly, also how people individually are should also make a difference. Although I understand that, typically people do things that they are more inclined to do as a personality. So if you're a researcher or if you are a writer, you may like independent space for yourself, cloistered. At the same time, that's the reason you're a writer. So if you are, on the other hand, a salesperson,
right,
and a good salesperson, you probably don't care who else is around me. I'm just making it up. I don't know if this is true or not.
Oh, it's absolutely true. Because I work with a lot of companies, and sometimes we will So the best business leaders understand that this is a tool, like open office is a tool. And so you're not going to pick up a hammer to drive a screw. You have to have the right tool. And so when I work with my clients, a lot of times we'll look department by department, because people tend to gravitate where their personality is. A lot of writers tend to be a little bit introverted. So they're going to be less likely to be comfortable in a big open environment. Although the one caveat to that is that the millennial generation, the people that were born in the 80s and 90s, they have a tendency to much more easily be able to shut out that background noise. So a baby boomer or a Generation X who's an introvert, they want a private office. A Gen Y millennial, they can just put their headphones on, and suddenly they've found themselves in a quieter place. So some of the discussions about open office and closed offices are also a discussion about the generations in the workplace today.
That's very interesting. Now, you said the cost is a definite argument, which makes sense. But nobody looks at productivity. I mean, it's a complex thing to say, am I increasing my productivity by taking this approach versus that approach? Do you think that the productivity is affected significantly? In terms of significance, I don't mean just a statistical significance, but I mean practical significance, or what statistical terms is called effect size. The quantum of improvement.
Actually, it's open office can impact productivity both for the positive and the negative, depending on who you're trying to impact. So what happens on the positive side is that basically, a lot of America's GDP has gone up and up and up because we're squeezing more and more out of our people as individuals, and we've pretty much hit a cap. I mean, with email and text and all that stuff, as individuals, we cannot work more hours than we are already working. And so, but what businesses are discovering is that we can produce more working collaboratively. And so the open office really drives up our ability to work collaboratively, to work in teams. And there's lots of research that have proven that diverse teams actually drive innovation. So the open office really impacts productivity in a positive way when that's what your team is doing. Now, if your team, for instance, I was working with Medtronic in some of their research areas, and they have a lot of inventor researchers who are head down and really need to focus. Now, if I took all those people out of their areas and put them in a totally open office plan, they would not be as productive. So it really does depend on what is this person's job description, who do they need to collaborate with, and how. And in general, the right solution is to have some combination of spaces. Because even in this engineering example that I gave you, what we decided to do was to create what we call the collaborative cafe. So throughout the building, we put these little spaces that you could take a break from sitting in your cubicle, and you could go get a cup of coffee, run into somebody, and Medtronic is actually inventing heart implants, spine implants, brain implants. And so there were physical models. So maybe you run into somebody, maybe you start talking about something, maybe there's a little bit more collaboration that could happen between diverse people. But then you're done kind of doing that, and you can go back to your focus space. So that idea of really mixing it up, and the percentage of open office versus more traditional offices has everything to do with who are your people and what does productivity mean in that context.
So there's the issue of productivity, which I think is central, because the cost is just a cost. It's an investment, essentially. It's not even a cost. You should look at it as an investment. So if you're going to put in money, it doesn't matter how much money you put in. If you're going to get a return over it, then you're all right. So I think the cost issue completely should be, in my mind, ignored, or can be ignored, as long as we are making an investment decision and say, well, what do I need to do? And do I have enough money? If I do, then I need to make sure that I am getting the right, or optimizing my returns over my investment in space. And there's the other factor of attracting the right people in tough environments where you're needing solid, diverse, as well as less supplied talent. You're looking for quality people. then you need to give them more than just the salary. And so there are factors that will influence their choice to work with you. And I think that's where it can help.
Right. Well, one of the kind of statistics that I often talk about is even at the highest unemployment that the U.S. had in the last few years, there were 3.8 million jobs that went unfilled for more than 6 months. So there is a real battle for talent, because if you can imagine the impact that those unfilled positions had on those firms that were looking for those people. And a lot of times your physical environment really can act as an attraction and retention tool. A couple of ways that actually works, and it's very different between generations. Again, it's interesting because it really is a generational conversation. One of the things that Towers Watson did a attraction retention survey, annual attention survey, and what they found is that the number one reason people stay at their jobs is pay. Number two is job security. Number three is career advancement, particularly for the next generation coming up. When someone walks into a very traditional corporate office, wood paneled, whatever, it reeks of hierarchy, right? And so your perception is, I could work here for 20 years and get to the top. When a millennial generation person walks into an open office, much more casual, much more fast moving, it feels like a more flat organization, whether it is or not. And so before that person ever steps into your office for the interview, they've been waiting in the lobby and basically making a decision or having a perception about who you are. And so one of the things that Open Office does is it really does attract millennials a little bit better, because their perception is that they will be able to career advance faster. They read the physical environment the same way that people read body language.
Right. No, absolutely. I understand. I mean, you go to a law firm and you see the wood paneled offices occupied by 50-year-olds, and you are 20-something, and you say, I am not hanging out here for the next 20 years to get to that office. So it's understandable. Yeah. Whereas you go to a high tech and you can see, a youngster leading as a vice president, and you say, you know what, I could be that too.
Right, exactly. So it reads like that opportunity. And one of the things that those retention studies actually discovered is that Generation X and baby boomers, we will complain about things that we don't like at work. The millennials will leave. So really, they're much more of a retention problem. So the other thing that your space can actually do for you is that almost every retention study ever done, somewhere in the top 10, one of the reasons that people stay at the office are because they have a friend at work. And so if you make sure that you're creating opportunities for people to make a friend at work, whether that's the layout can have you, just the way that the corridors are laid out, you can run into other people, or providing programs. I know at the Google has a workplace strategy group, and the reason that Google has baristas is not just because they can, but because they realize that the best waiting time for coffee is 4.5 minutes. If you wait less than that, you will not talk to the other people waiting in line. If you wait more than that, you may actually not come get a cup of coffee. So in order to continue to create that community and that bonding, if I just had a coffee pot, you'd go pour your coffee and leave. But if I have to wait for the barista to make my espresso, then I might talk to you, we might become friends, my potential ability to collaborate with you, to form teams of diversity, and to make a friend increases. And so for all kinds of reasons, that's a program and a kind of physical facility thing that is actually going to help with attraction and retention.
This is so amazing, because if 10, 15 years ago we had talked about this, a lot of people will say, yeah, this is a lot of maybes and maybes and maybes. I'm not going to make any decision based on maybes. But today you have Google as an example of almost everything extraordinary, almost everything innovative. And you say, well, yeah, those maybes, if they're paying attention to those maybes, there must be something to it. And so that's a good thing. But in terms of research, there's two kinds of research. There's quantitative, which you can put a number to it. And then there is those qualitative ethnographic studies that we're talking about, where you can make a case. You can convince a person, you can prove a point, and you say, look, there is a reason for you as a CEO of a company to reconsider your redesigning of your office space, because that will help you get better people, that will get the productivity out of them, and so on and so forth. But what are the solid numbers, if there are any, in terms of improvement in innovation, improvement in productivity? Is there any such thing, or are these all anecdotal, or are these all ethnographic studies?
Well, there are actually now, it's amazing, there are actually quite a few, and probably kind of the most cutting edge. There's a guy named Ben Waber who invented this device that basically, when an employee wears like an RFID employee badge, he actually invented a device that acts as that, but it's a tracker. And it doesn't listen in on our conversation, but it pays attention to how much time I spend with you and where I go in the building. And he was actually hired by Bank of America to look at their call center. And so they put these devices on all the employees in these various call centers, and they realized that different call centers had different cultures, partly because of the physical environment and partly because of things like when each individual's break was planned. And so because they were able to actually measure these things, they were able to make adjustments to the physical environment and to the working schedule, and improve the numbers in both the weaker and the stronger call centers.
Wow, that's amazing. These days, with all this technology, the data that is collected is just out of science fiction pretty much, and with that data you can see things. I mean, 50 years ago, who knew about alcoholism? I mean, you knew only about the alcoholic that was perhaps living with you, or you knew someone in your family, but you had no idea what collectively alcoholism means, how alcoholics influence the family, how their children are influenced, and what are the factors that contribute. And so much that we know today was completely unknown. But these cultural factors play an enormous role in the success of an organization. As Google has obviously been an example of just about everything. So it makes sense to say, you as an organization, if you have the resources available, this is an area that you as a CEO must pay attention to and say, am I running by default, or should I do something about it?
Well, one of the reasons that the dean, Amy Hillman over at Arizona State University, brought me into the College of Business is because she wants to make sure that her MBA students are aware of this. Like, you don't have to be able to do it, but you have to know who to hire and what to ask of them. So when you hire your designer or you hire your architect, it's not just pretty. The kind of ticket to entry. The roof can't leak, the toilets have to flush, and it has to be pretty. That's the ticket to entry. The question is, what happens besides that? What's the ROI? How can you drive productivity? How do you support your culture? How do you support your brand? How do you attract and retain the employees that you specifically want by using the physical environment? And then I was actually involved in a program where we were doing some measuring for a company, PCA Skin. They sell skincare products. And that was one that we actually tracked results of training time, attraction, retention, number of employees that were trying to build their company, and also, of course, gross profit. And all of those things can be impacted. And what we discovered is that facilities didn't do it alone. We had to also modify the organizational structure to match the facilities, and then also modify the compensation plan. So it's really the structure, the programs, and the facilities. And when you can get those three things aligned, then you've got a business home run. You can get people, behavior, it's so hard to change people's behavior. So if you can use those three things to get, halfway there, 3/4 of the way there, then you've significantly lessened the battle to get your people to do what you need to do to be successful.
No, this is right. There's a lot of research in neuropsychology on some of these issues as to how do you influence people's behavior and how do you change them, modify them. And they found that not simple things, I would say, but single facets, such as a person getting a nose job done or something else, can actually influence your attitudes, your beliefs, and how you respond to your environment completely, and your performance in the world, just by changing one external factor. And there's a lot that says, make it, fake it till you make it kind of thing. To some extent, you're influencing external characteristics to influence your internal characteristics, because these are all interrelated.
Right. Well, what we did at PCA Skin was I I had call center people who were basically sitting in high-walled cubicles, and so they were not making friends at work. And the other thing is that the different employees who sat in these different cubicles had different skills. So maybe one of them used to be a nurse, one of them used to be an esthetician, one of them had no background at all. And so depending on who you got when you were a customer and you called in, you might get excellent service, you might not. And what we did was we took all these call center people and we put them in groups of 6 to 8, because anthropological studies actually prove that people will form tighter trust bonds. That's the largest group that you can have, is a leaderless group. And so we trust each other more, we talk to each other more. And so we put the groups of 6 to 8, and then we kind of arranged the cubicles in almost like a loose circle. High wall around that circle, low walls internal to that circle. So now my 6 to 8 people can actually, if I'm not on the phone, I can turn around and talk to you. I can make a friend. If a call comes in and I'm not the right person for it, I can actually spin around in my chair and see that, so-and-so is not on the phone. I can pass the call off. So that helped. And then I can also, if I'm a new person, I can overhear the more experienced people. And so and then the other thing we did was we changed the compensation. So now they get compensated not just on their individual sales, but also on the team sales. And then also every 3 months, we rearrange the chairs within that group of 8. So you'll be sitting next to somebody else. So with all of that done, overall company revenues were up 78%.
Oh, wow.
Training, yeah, oh, wow. Training was down 31.5%. The number of employees almost doubled. So these are real measurable results. Now, the facilities would not have done that by itself, and the compensation changes would have done it by itself, the training changes, none of those would do them by itself. But when we combine all three, suddenly these people are working as a team, they have friends, they're excited about coming to work, their energy goes up, right? And they're performing significantly better than they were.
No, this is amazing. I personally recall when I started my career in management consulting a long time ago, we were in a large room with 4 people, and I remember that time the most, as opposed to in a cubicle at Dell or in an office environment in an ad agency. I remember my old times. Of course, age matters as well, but some of my coworkers who started the same day as I did. One guy is the CMO of Caesars International. But that was the best time. So I think the anecdotally I can say, yes, the size makes a difference. I've been in several situations, 1 person, 2 person, 5 people, 6 people more together, and now you see the agile environment for project management, and they have created cultures that are more productive simply by orchestrating pretty much everything. I mean, you orchestrate it's almost like an orchestra, that you've got so many things to consider, and when you put them all together, you get them ready for success. And you can see that productivity improvements as you just give some numbers. So it's not just talk.
And and since we were talking about Google, one of the things that's interesting, they don't talk a lot about what they're doing, but I was looking at the floor plans of some of their most recent facilities. The one in Zurich, and there's another one that they built recently in Ireland. And if you look at those floor plans, it's not individual offices, and it's not acres of cubicles. They are rooms, discrete rooms with a door on them that have 6, 8, 10 desks in them. So it looks like they're really paying attention to that group size research and implementing it in their facilities.
Right, and to your earlier point that everybody at different times needs different environments. So if you can provide a situation where you have all of these possibilities, and depending upon your need of the time or need of the hour, you could go and engage in a different way. So you may be you don't have to be tied to an office desk anymore. You are completely mobile, agile, whatever you want to call it, and use situations and scenarios that fit your needs.
Well, there's a couple of different companies that have really engaged that idea. GlaxoSmithKline is the big one. Their new offices in Philadelphia and Brazil are all completely what's called activity-based workplace. So no one has an assigned desk, even the CEO. So you go in and you've got this, your employee badge has actually electronics in it, so that if I want to know where you are, I can look you up on the computer and, oh, you're sitting over here today, I can go find you. But you can sit anywhere in the building. You can sit in a more private space, a more public space, just depending on what you need to do today. And so the activity-based workplace, that's one way that people are making this happen. The other thing that some companies are doing is they're going to a work flex and kind of counting on, look, if you need private space, go work from home. But if you want to collaborate, come to the office. Now, the challenge is, we know from innovation research that we need you to come to the office. So now I've got to use almost retail strategies to make sure you're attracted. Like that you will go, gosh, I need to concentrate today, but I want to go to the office tomorrow because they have these amenities. It's in a fantastic location. There's a fabulous community there. I mean, those are all retail strategies. So the whole Marissa Mayer Yahoo thing, basically what is not, she basically ordered all her people to come back to the office. But what you don't see so much in the papers, they also completely remodeled those offices so that nobody would complain about that, right? It now looks a lot more like Google than it used to. So a kind of work flex but make attractive office is the second strategy, besides the alternative, the activity-based workplace. So, and then some people are just within the same space, having people assigned based on department. You might be you're the marketing department, you're at open office desks, you're the finance department, you're in cubicles, and oh, by the way, here's some spare open office desks and some spare kind of private spaces that are maybe part of the food court cafe thing, so that if you happen to be assigned to the wrong one for your activities that day, you can still come find some commonly available spaces to be more focused or more gregarious, depending on where you are that day.
This is amazing. This is a wonderful conversation. It's more of the cutting edge stuff that people are sort of cognizant of but are not aware of. And so hopefully this conversation will bring to awareness the ideas that we've just discussed and say, look, we're not saying here's how you go about doing it, but at least you need to think about it and reach out to people who know how to handle these kind of projects and think about and create something slightly better than your current existing environment. Now, last question is, we've looked at, you've given a lot of examples of productivity improvements, but is there any study in terms of large organizations versus small organizations? Because, huge corporations like the Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000, this is completely understandable. But what about mid-sized companies, startups? I see a lot of startups also use some of these concepts.
Actually, the bulk of the clients that I work with are not startups, but kind of second stage companies. So, because in general, startups are, they're they get the cheap office space they can afford, or maybe they're in their garage and then they take the nest and their furniture is left over from their house, or maybe a little bit of IKEA if they have the money for that. But a lot of the companies that I work with, they're at the end of that stage. They're really trying to move into their very first real office, positioning themselves for public offering, getting ready to really become who they are. So in some ways, it's like Maslow's pyramid, right? So they've moved from survival up to self-actualization. Who are we? How do we work? And I love working with those clients because they're at the point where this is where the magic happens. Because that first office, that's really going to define your culture for a really long time. And
set standards and define yourself.
Exactly. And so it is what it looks like, because that's your physical brand, but it's also how it's laid out. I mean, are you going to be a really collaborative culture? Are you going to be a more focused culture? Are you going to be half and a half? And so it really requires the CEO kind of looking internally. So that's so that's not the answer to your question, because I don't know of any research that's been done on those kind of companies. I think they're more in kind of survival mode. The research I've seen has really been more on the large companies and their impact.
Interesting. Now, are there any books, ebooks, white papers on this topic, or are we talking too cutting edge?
It's really cutting edge. I'm working on a book, So give it about 3 months is when we're set to, we're going to e-publish, and you'll find it at normfollowsfunction.com. But I don't really know of anything, which is why I'm working on the book, because what I really want is to create something that's it's a kind of a cheat sheet for CEOs. You don't have to go deep into this topic, but you do have to understand it enough to know whether you've hired the right architect, the right workplace strategist for your business.
No, that's a great one. In fact, some kind of a, if not an instrument or a checklist of sorts that says, these are the things that you need to consider and ask. These are the questions you need to ask the person that you're working with, because it is so cutting edge. You really don't know how to handle it, and there's not enough information. So I think some kind of a checklist of sorts that says, ask these 10 questions, and hopefully you'll make a better decision than otherwise.
Right. And I think the other thing, the biggest thing for the CEO to continue to ask, what happens with all of us is when we get slightly outside of our area of expertise, we have a tendency to back off. And I think if a CEO just continues to ask the questions they always ask of everyone, which is, what's the ROI?
Right.
How does this benefit my business? How does it create more productivity? To ask that of everyone. Even when you hire an interior designer and they pick yellow paint, then you say, great, yellow. How does that increase my productivity? And if they cannot answer that question, you may not have the right person.
Absolutely. I think the simplest questions are the ones that get you the biggest bang for your buck. So those questions are very important, and you don't have to know a whole lot to ask questions. You just need to be inquisitive.
Right, right.
Thank you, Kristen. I really, really enjoyed talking with you today.
This was great. I love talking about this topic anytime.